When I was growing up, I grew up in Bentry, West Virginia, and we lived in a humble little house there. It was $35 a month, and there was 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, living room, and a bathroom. There was a little garage outside, and we had everything that we needed to make us happy there in that little house. My daddy, he rode the alloy bus. He worked at the alloy plant when I was growing up, and he would get up, and go out and get on the alloy bus. I can still see him carrying his silver lunch pail to get on that bus, and I can hear that bus pulling in, and I can hear the brakes squeaking. It'd go, and then that door would open up, and my dad would get off that bus or get on the bus, and my grandpa and my uncles and family would be riding the bus. Now, sometimes my mom would let me ride that bus. If it was summertime and they was having a church Bible school over to Sycamore Church in Indore, West Virginia, Grandma would let me ride over there and go to Grandma's house. Now, my grandma and grandpa, it was Wilford and Ada Marie Hokum. And my papa, he was a janitor at the alloy plant. My dad was an electrician, and he worked his way up to that. And we had a hunting camp in Sugar Grove, Virginia. And my parents and my mom's family, and we would all go out there and visit, and all the men would go out there and hunt in the fall. Everybody would just load up, pack up all their duds, and head out to the camp. It was an interesting place to go. There was always something to do, somebody stopping by, somebody killing a turkey, a bear, a deer, squirrel, you name it. They was bringing it in for us to cook. It was interesting growing up in these mountains. Everything comes from the land. We didn't sit around and wait for somebody to go to the grocery store and pick up a bunch of stuff. I mean, somebody went to the grocery store every now and again, once a month or something, and got shortening, lard, salt, butter, sugar, and all that kind of stuff. But everything was made at Grandma's and Grandpa's house. It was made homemade. Everything was made from scratch. We didn't go out at Grandma's house and buy a bunch of junk and treats and stuff like that. Now, we did walk down the road and go to the store and get penny candy. I remember that. And back then, I can remember going and getting several pieces of candy for a penny. You can't do that now, but you could back then. We would walk down around the curve. My mommy was Hokum. She growed up there in Sycamore on the straight stretch.
Y'all want to ride up to Clay and go to Mrs. Rhodes to the fabric shop after a while? Get some of that fabric by the pound? Hey, you kids, get out of the creek. You're all gonna be sick. Get up here. You know better than that.
They lived right on the side of the road in between 2 mountains, and about everything around there was theirs. They had a big 2-story house, and it used to be a station, and they turned that into their home there on the Sycamore stretch. It was a beautiful place. Indore, Clay County, West Virginia. About everybody in the community was family. There wasn't hardly nobody in the area that wasn't family. Now, my Uncle Elk, he had a store down around the curve, and we'd walk down there to Elk's and get that penny candy. Now, sometimes it'd be a bunch of us walking down on the side of the road, buying candy and stuff. It was just an old gas station, and he'd give you a little brown poke, and it had, however much candy you could afford. You could take a nickel down there and come home with a half a bag of candy. Because back then you could get 3 or 4 pieces, like them little root beer barrels and stuff like that, cinnamon candy. You could get that stuff for 3 or 4 pieces of candy for a penny. And that's just the way it was. And we walk up and down the road playing in the creek bed. We'd throw rocks and go up on the hill. We always, there was a lot of commodities back in the day. Everybody got commodities. There was beans and lentils and cheese and butter, and they would had these gigantic big things that held like 5 pounds of American cheese in it, or big containers of lentils, all different kinds. And that's sometimes there would be extra lentils at my girlfriend's house over across the creek at Bentry. We'd go over and play in them lentils. And it was so much fun to, instead of having to make mud pies, we'd go over there and make beans or whatever we could find that, you know, that they had left over that went bad. They'd give us some old lentils and stuff that we could play with. And I remember that so well, vividly. I remember that. Because I loved to cook. And even when I was a teeny tiny girl, I would do anything to pretend that I was cooking. I loved it. My mom was an excellent cook, and she was always in the kitchen. She would start early in the morning, and she'd be in there. She'd start off most usually with her meat. She'd get that situated and figure out what kind of meat she's going to have first, and she'd get that going. And then she'd be working on her vegetables or her salad or her special meal, you know, and everything that she cooked was delicious. I mean, she always had, one of my favorite meals was fried pork chops, mashed potatoes and gravy, baked beans and coleslaw, cornbread. My goodness, she could cook. What I wouldn't give to go back to some of those days where I could be out playing and I could smell her food cooking for dinner. She was an excellent cook. Growing up in the mountains is truly a unique experience. It's beyond fabulous. I've moved away temporarily, but I've always came back to these mountains. I just really like living in the mountains. There's nothing like it. It's a simpler time back in the day when I was growing up. A simpler time, a simpler life. The cars went slower. There wasn't as many cars on the road. Mountain heritage is something that I take for granted, but it's something that came from these mountains, and it continues to come from these mountains every day. They kind of wrap around you and give you a big hug. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for stopping by my channel today, and I'll see you on the next video. This is a Film Days presentation.